what is the research methodology used in the sciences? Well, there's actually two approaches. One is the inductive approach and one is the deductive approach. The inductive approach is characterized by the inference of general laws from particular instances. The deductive method or axiomatic method is, and you already see that, well, that definition is quite a bit longer, should make you suspicious. In logic, the procedure by which an entire science or system of theorems is deduced in accordance with specified rules by logical deduction from certain basic propositions called axioms. And now it gets really concerning, which in turn are constructed from a few terms taken as primitive. These terms may be either arbitrarily defined, did you hear that? Arbitrarily defined, or conceived according to a model in which some intuitive warrant for their truth is felt to exist. Intuition, feeling, wow, it sounds pretty scientific to me. Okay, so we've got these two methods. Now, how do scientists work? And we've got plenty of scientists here, and I'm sure they will confirm that. They look at the data, look at the facts, data. So careful observation of phenomena. Then you analyze the data. You organize the material. And as you do that, you naturally see some patterns. And that often gives you an idea, well, maybe if this happens, always this happens, well, maybe there's a link. Well, we have to test. So you develop hypotheses from observing the data, and then you can use the Popperian approach. You either reject them or you fail to reject, which is the strongest evidence you'd ever get that you fail to reject. That is the scientific approach, and that is the inductive methodology. Now, what is the methodology used in economics? It's the deductive method, surprise, surprise. So, remember, intuition, feelings, axioms. So, here's the axiom that economics is built on, and I'm talking about English language, mainstream economics, these schools of thought that you saw, equilibrium economics. Individuals are rational, selfish, autistic. You know, there's no social relationships. They don't care about others. Of course, if this was true, the planet would be empty because we all would have died as babies because they can't look after themselves, so you need somebody else. But this is assumed not to happen. Everyone looks after themselves. That's the axiom. Now, an axiom is something we know to be true for sure, and that's convenient because then we never have to check whether it is true and actually it's not true. That's an axiom. Now, then, based on this axiom, we then build by making assumptions that we admit are not true, such as perfect information, complete markets, price adjustment, zero transaction cost. Infinite lives is usually also one of them. I mean, okay, so that's the deductive method used in economics. So, in other words, we've constructed a theoretical dream world in which markets are optimal because it is a theoretical dream world. And we've defined it such that markets are always efficient and optimized. Any intervention, such as by a policymaker to change things for the better, what they think needs to be done, well, that's not needed because it's already optimal in this theoretical dream world. So that's why they usually say we need to deregulate, liberalize, and privatize government intervention. It's just distorting things because it's the economy is optimal left on its own, which essentially big business likes because then they don't get any obstacles. Developing countries are told you need to deregulate, liberalize, open up to free trade. You shouldn't have policies, industrial policies to build up your economy, when actually there's no economy in the world that has developed according to that advice, but that doesn't stop economists. Now, Popper recognized that followers of a particular school of thought may want to defend their theory, their pet theory, and adopt immunizing stratagems to guard their theories against being falsified. And when you look at different theories, you should always be careful, because one that cannot be tested is then not a good theory. That's one of the principles. There is also the other danger of so-called reverse engineering, which is, what do we want to prove? You start with the question that you want to prove. And just for sake of argument, I mean, imagine this scenario where there's some very big corporations and some very big banks. They say, oh, wouldn't it be convenient if we could have the argument that there should be no restrictions on what we, the big banks and big businesses, are doing? What can we do to get that result? Well, let's have some objective scientific studies on this topic, and we're funding it. And of course, you know, if you're a badly paid academic, this will be very tempting. And you're sort of trying to find out what's the sponsor wanting to hear. So imagine this scenario where you start with your preferred conclusion, such as markets are optimal and efficient, and you know, any intervention and government rules should be abolished. You know, that's the conclusion. So now you work backwards. What sort of model will give us this conclusion? Then, what sort of assumptions do we need to justify this model, and what axioms to present that entire package? And then comes the most important step: present in reverse order. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got adults in the room here. You know, the world is a tough place. Now, we've got to model this, so we've got to make some simplifying assumptions, but people are looking after themselves, aren't they? I mean, people are pretty sort of profit-oriented. So here's our assumptions: profit maximization, there's tough competition out there. We've got the internet, perfect information. Now we've got this model here, and we can manipulate. Oh, here's the result. Markets are optimal. We need deregulation, liberalization, and privatization. Well, who would have thought that? Well, if this model says this, then we've got to do it. Now, of course, this would be rather less than scientific. I suppose one could call it charlatanism. And, of course, it's always important to have the common sense check. Anyone recognize this picture?
Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, Alice in Wonderland. Led by the hand of the Queen in Wonderland. And they've got a nice little conversation going there about things that are hard to believe. So Alice says, there's no use trying. One can't believe impossible things. The Queen responds, I dare say you haven't had much practice. When I was your age, I always did it, practice to believe impossible things for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. But what we learned here is that certainly not Alice, but not even the Queen in Wonderland would qualify as economists, because they don't believe enough impossible things. It's not good enough, even for the Queen, to just believe 6 impossible things before breakfast. You've got to believe at least 8 impossible things all the time. So even if we give the economists the benefit of the doubt, and they love to present mathematical calculations, let's use probability. Let's say there's the probability of any one of these assumptions to come true is high, is more than 50%. It's more likely to be true than not. So we're really helping them, giving them a bit benefit of the doubt here. Even in this scenario, say 55% that each assumption is true. What they seem to have forgotten, despite their maths fetish, is they haven't done their maths right. Because 8 of these assumptions have to be true at the same time. And what is the probability? Even with each being true, the probability of being true of 55%, of all 8 being true at the same time, it's 0.55 to the power of 8, which is less than 1%. So what do we conclude from this? Because really, frankly, the probability of having complete markets, perfect competition, perfect information, is somewhat less than 55%. I think it's around 0. Therefore, we know markets cannot be expected to clear, and demand cannot be expected to be equal to supply.